we have Mick McGrath. Mick is the director of DevOps at Bitovi with over 8 years of experience leading teams and building web applications at scale and spearheading the development of the open source project Bitops. He has led technology teams for some of the world's biggest companies and has encountered and overcome many of the most complex deployment challenges, including high availability, disaster recovery, and auto scalability for clients like Yum Brands. When he's not directing Bitovi's DevOps operations, Mick enjoys traveling, hiking, and being a father.
So today I want to talk about using GitHub as a platform engineering platform. And what that means practically is any Bitovi developer can deploy any project into Bitovi's AWS account with very little. You don't have to understand all the underlying mechanism and infrastructure as code. But what's more than that, with the technique that I'm going to show today, really any developer can deploy any project into their own AWS account. I've got a couple of GitHub actions that I'll go through and kind of show you how it works. So first I want to kick off a demo because we are doing deployments. Deployments do have to run. And then I want to come back and talk about DevOps maturity and platform engineering, like what it is and why it matters. And then I'll walk through the technique that we're unveiling today on how GitHub Actions can turn GitHub into a platform engineering platform. So I'm going to go start a demo. We have an AWS account, and we've got some instances in here. You see some are stopped, some are terminated. This one is actually the one that I want to take a look at. And I will pull up the public DNS here and just kind of show you the running app. That is port 3000. HTTP for now. We're working on the domain stuff. Anyway, so we have an app here that's hello world, GitHub Actions, deploy Docker to EC2. And what I want to do is change this text. So we have this simple application here, this DevOps training EC2 GitHub Actions example. And this is just a simple one-line server file. There's an index file that serves up on the root this text. And I want to change this text. So just in GitHub, I'm going to go in here and change this text to say, hello, Bitovi meetup. So I could create a branch on this. I'll talk about branches later. So it's a bit of a sneak peek or teaser there. I'm going to commit to the base branch for now. Generally speaking, this would be discouraged. You'd want to have a pull request and everything. For the sake of the demo, I'm going to kick this off. So I'm going to all I did was change the text and commit that to the base branch. So now if I look at actions, I see I do have an update for Meetup pipeline running. So our demo is running in the background. I'm going to hop back over to the presentation. We'll come back to the demo in a bit. All right, so let's talk about DevOps maturity and platform engineering. So on this very simplified DevOps maturity scale, we have three categories. You have no DevOps, which is you're a developer, you have a project, you want it deployed, not sure how, don't know infrastructure as code, don't have anybody to go to be able to say, hey, here's this thing I want deployed. So there's no DevOps. After that, you have mature DevOps, which is there's a group of people that you have access to that you can say, I have this thing that I want deployed. You give it to them, and they sort of work with you to figure out how to get it deployed, where you want to put it, and all that kind of stuff. And then the last one is platform engineering, which is where you still have a team of people who are building automations and deployment configuration, things like that. But you as a developer, you don't have to go to them. They provide tools to you so that you can deploy and manage your own applications and infrastructure. So Bitovi DevOps is pretty squarely in the mature DevOps space. So we get a lot of deployment requests from internal apps that we're working on, whether it's a staffing app, bios, Hey Emoji, there's a lot of them in here. And so these are requests that come to the DevOps department for deployment. And then we have internal to the DevOps department, we have some DevOps specific ones for our account management or recruiting clusters or training clusters, testing BitOps and things like that. So all of these deployment efforts and deployment requests take quite a lot of time. And then if we, as the DevOps department, are busy doing something else or you are otherwise unavailable to help you, then the time to get your thing deployed goes up quite a bit. So like I said, Bitovi is pretty squarely in the mature DevOps space. And this is where BitOps fits. So the way that BitOps works today, you need an understanding of infrastructure as code and deployment patterns to really get value out of BitOps. So BitOps is today valuable for mature DevOps teams. And what I want to announce today is that I can say Bitovi DevOps has taken some strong, powerful steps towards platform engineering. And we're doing that with BitOps operations repos. Those are the deployment repos that BitOps uses as GitHub Actions. So what this allows us to do, like is the title of the talk, is we can utilize GitHub as a platform engineering platform. We've got two actions today. One is deploying any project to an AWS virtual machine, and the other one is deploying any front-end app to GitHub Pages. So this is sort of what the configuration looks like in order for you to deploy your application to an AWS account. It looks as simple as this. You provide your action. So on pushes to the main branch, you reference your the action that you want to use, whether it's pushing to AWS or GitHub Pages, and then you provide your AWS credentials here, tell it what the app port is. So there's some parameters that you can configure how your deployment works, but you just include this in your project, and that will hook up a deployment for you. Again, whether you have a service repo, Node, Python, Go, PHP, doesn't really matter. Whatever the backend language is, you can deploy those. We have a GitHub action for it. Or if you have a front-end app that has a build step and you want to host that in GitHub Pages, regardless of what the build is or what the framework is, you can host that on GitHub Pages with GitHub Actions. And from this, there are lots of different possibilities that we are looking to explore. For example, if you want a Kubernetes cluster, you can create a GitHub action to spin up an EKS cluster in your AWS account, as simply as something like this. You provide something like that and you get an EKS cluster with all the bells and whistles like ingress and observability and all that sort of stuff involved. Another one that we're working on is Hey Emoji. So Bitovi uses Hey Emoji as a employee community or employee recognition system. Somebody does something you like, you can give them an egg. That's a point. You can give them a hatching chick. That's more points. And then it keeps a running tally of like who's getting the most recognition and stuff like that. We're working on an action that you can include to have your own Hey emoji wherever you want, just with a simple, few lines of code like that. You can have your own Hey emoji in your own Slack to start giving out praise to your comrades. So the way that this works, BitOps is under the hood of these. Essentially, each one of the GitHub actions is an operations repo. That's what BitOps uses to understand infrastructure as code and how it's organized. And so we just embed that in a GitHub action, and that allows us to kind of pre-configure different infrastructure stacks for your application. And you can deploy to AWS or GitHub Pages. So again, BitOps wrapped in GitHub Actions, use that in your GitHub repo, and you can deploy where you want. All right, so back to the demo. So if we come over here, this was our deployed thing. I'm not even going to check. I'll just refresh. There we go. Hello, Bitovi meetup. So all I did was change the code and push it in. One other thing that I want to point out. So if we go back to this example, I'll show the pipelines real quick so that you can kind of see what's going on. So we have the deploy pipeline. Again, this is it. This is what allowed us to push to create a new virtual machine in our AWS account. All we're doing is specifying the AWS credentials here. So Bitovi is using in the Bitovi org. So you have to be a Bitovian for this. But we have a set of AWS accounts that we can publish to. And so if you want to deploy your project, let me know. We can find a place to put it. And if you are not in Bitovi and you want to use the GitHub action, you can create your own secrets for your AWS credentials for your AWS account and just drop them in your action whenever you use it, and you should be good to go. So this is actually published on the GitHub Actions marketplace. See if that one comes up. Yep, deploy Docker to AWS. So this is available today. There's some information in here on how to use it. Yeah, go check it out. And another thing that I want to point out here is that we have PR environments. PR environments are pretty simple. It uses the exact same reference approach because there's some logic built into the action that will generate AWS resources based on your GitHub org and your GitHub repository and your branch name. And so all of your resources will be tagged really nicely in your AWS account based on where the configuration is coming from. And so the only difference really here is we have on pull requests to main, and then we have a little conditional here that says if the branch name does not contain skip deploy, so you can create branches that don't trigger PR environments, then trigger the same deployment approach. Everything else is the same in there. And on the other side of it, when that PR is closed, so on pull requests closed, again, same skip deploy logic here. We have basically the same thing here. The only difference is the only real difference to call out is we have this stack destroy true that tells Terraform to clean out all of the resources in there. So we create a PR that results in resources in our cloud provider account. When we close the PR, whether it's merged or just closed, those resources are torn down. And so, yeah, we have PR environments. I'm not going to go through that. I could probably kick off an easy PR here, but the identifier would look different. We would have an instance in here instead of Bitovi DevOps Training EC2 GitHub Actions example main. It would say whatever the name of our branch is as the identifier there. So we would have a new VM that we could look at. So we're working on surfacing the URL for that a little bit better. Right now, you have to go into the pipeline output and you look for a specific DNS identifier thing that'll tell you if you don't have direct access to the AWS account, this will tell you what your URL is that you can use for that deployment. We're working on pulling this out and pushing it up so it's available in the root here. So you can use GitHub environment so that you'll just have a button here you can click to see your environment. But we'll get there. Like I said, there's an issue for that, so we'll be working on that coming up next. But again, this is available today, so if you want to deploy things, you now have a way to do it. So we have internal to Bitovi, we have a training for this. If you have a project you want to deploy, let me know. I'll link you to the training, and it'll basically walk you through it. It's it should take you 20 minutes at the most to go from nothing to have it set up. We started doing speed runs to see how quickly we can get it done. I did one this morning in 5 minutes or so it's pretty simple. There's a blog post to come based on that training, so we'll have a blog post for this GitHub action, and we can link that out whenever we have it. What this allows us to do is any Bitovi developer can deploy any Bitovi project in Bitovi's AWS account, and more generally speaking, any developer, any project in their own AWS account with a simple GitHub action. All right, so we've got one question in here so far from Mark. Would it be possible, I assume there are open source action definitions somewhere, to create versions of these that deploy to other things like Azure, DigitalOcean, or similar? I can see this being awesome for some of my personal projects, but those are on DigitalOcean and Azure support coming. So under the hood of all this is BitOps. So BitOps is run by plugins. We currently have an AWS plugin, and it would be a matter of basically writing an Azure plugin or a DigitalOcean plugin for BitOps under the hood, and then determining how to surface that in the action. We'd probably have a new GitHub action. How we do that, we could see. We'd probably have a new GitHub action that's like deploy Docker to DigitalOcean, and another one for deploy Docker to Azure, things like that. Yep. So we could, we'd probably have one we can deploy Helm to AWS to an EKS cluster, or really just anyway, the possibilities are endless. So those are types of things there, or all the possibility for piping is there. It's just a matter of what do we want to support, what features do we want to add, which generally is going to take the form of BitOps plugins and GitHub Actions. Yeah, so I will say too, just maybe to wrap up here, if you have some ideas like that, like you want Azure support or DigitalOcean support, feel free to go create an issue in the BitOps repo. That's github.com/Bitovi/BitOps. Go in there and create an issue, and whether it's for a GitHub action or whether it's for a new plugin support or something like that, drop it in there and we can work with you to get that hooked up.